Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well. You're welcome to come as close as you like or stay where you are. All is fine. I can project loud enough for those in the back rows or for those who choose to sit really close as well. It's very exciting. Chanukah is coming up. It's hard to believe that it's here. Chanukah is just a few days away. If you haven't signed up to join us for our Chanukah program on Motzei Shabbos, I don't know if it's too late, but if you're interested and you haven't signed up, please think about it. It should be really fun and enjoyable evening for everybody together. I want to spend a few minutes tonight exploring Chanukah, in particular the miracle of Chanukah, and to try to understand a few questions which on one hand I think are very basic, on the other hand I think change the perspective of what it is that we're doing on Chanukah itself. And so if we wanted to find out a lot about Chanukah, there's actually a very few places we can go to learn about Chanukah. The Gemara does not have a ton of content about Chanukah, unlike, for example, when it comes to Purim. We always think of like Purim and Chanukah together. You have a whole Masechta, you have a whole tractate when it comes to Megillah that tells you everything there is to know about Purim and the story and so on and so forth. When it comes to Chanukah, we have a lot less to work with. And one of the main sources that we use actually comes from the Rambam. So if you look, I brought for you the first 8 halachos of the Rambam over here in Perek Gimel. I want to review them with you a little bit. We'll kind of move relatively quick, and we'll see what the Rambam tells us about Chanukah. So, b'bayit sheni, kishamalchei Yavan gazru gezeret al Yisrael. It was the time of the Second Temple. The Greek kingdom issued decrees against the Jewish people. Vitlu datam v'inichu tam lasok b'torah mitzvos, and they didn't let the Jewish people observe Torah and mitzvos. Upashtu yadam b'mamonam b'bnoteyam nichnasu leheichal fartzu bo pratzot v'timu hataharot. They extended their hands against all their properties, their daughters, and what we know to be like relative a big piece of the Chanukah story. They go into the sanctuary and they make everything impure. This is very significant. But and so this continues until God hears the cries of the oppressed, and he comes and he delivers the Greeks into our hands, and he puts into place the Chashmonaim, who are the high priests, and they lead the charge, as we know, to ultimately save the Jewish people. And it continues, and this continues until for another 200 years until the destruction of the Second Temple. And so it continues in Halacha Bet, when the Jewish people overcame their enemies and destroyed them, they entered into the sanctuary. And what day was that? It was Kafei Kislev, which is coming up just on Sunday night. And so that day, and as we know, they couldn't find any oil, any pure oil, actually, I should say, in the Beis HaMikdash. All it was enough oil to last for one day. And the miracle, as we know, is that this lasted for many days. Now, there's a very famous question that's asked here, which we're not going to explore, but the very famous question is, well, how many days do we celebrate Chanukah for? For 8 days, 8 days of Chanukah. And so we say, why? Because the menorah lasted for 8 days. But how many days was there actually a miracle? There were only 7 days of miracle, because we know, as the Rambam tells us, there was definitely enough oil to last for the first day. So the first day, in a sense, wasn't a miracle. But days 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are a miracle. So you could argue, how many days should we really be celebrating Hanukkah? 7 days. And this is a very famous question of the Beis Yosef. He gives 100 different answers. I think, for me, one of the most meaningful answers ties into the idea that there really perhaps 2 different miracles that we're remembering, and one is a military victory, and the second is a miracle of the oil, and we'll come back to how that, I think, plays into how we observe Hanukkah today. And so again, like you look in Halacha Gimel, Mipnei Zeh Hitkinu HaChachamim Shebot Hadur Yu Shmonat HaYamim Ha'ilu Shetchilatan Kafei V'Kislev Yemei Simcha V'Halo Madlikim B'Maneros Be'erev Al Pilchei Abatim B'Cholayla. So the sages come along and they say, okay, this is a miracle. We have to celebrate it. And we should celebrate it for 8 days, beginning on the 25th of Kislev, and we should commemorate what happened. And then Halacha Daled, I'm just skipping ahead. Kol shechayev b'krit haMegillah chayev b'adlakat ner Chanukah. If you are chayev in reading the Megillah, you're also chayev in lighting the Chanukah candles. We'll talk more about that as well. And then let's continue to halacha hey. So again, we're going through the halachos here of Chanukah. One of the things that we know that plays an important role on Chanukah is we also say Hallel every single day. And we make the bracha. And again, don't worry about what the bracha is the Rambam says, because again, there's different brachos that are said, but whatever, we say a bracha. And it's whether you do it ben b'yachid, ben b'tzibur. And even though the Hallel itself is a rabbinic decree that we say Hallel, we still say Asher K'disha Mitzvah B'tzivanu, that God commanded us to do so. Why? Because this is similar to what we do when it comes to Megillah. Even though God did not tell us in an outward command that we should read the Megillah, it still says that we are commanded to do so. And this shows us the power of the rabbinic decree. But notice what happens if you flip the page to Halacha Vav, Zayin, and Ches. What happens now? Lo Hallel shel Chanukah b'lvad hu shemidivri sofrim ela kriyat Hallel le'olam midivri sofrim. The Rambam now goes and starts giving us the halachos of not just the Hallel of Chanukah, but all Hallels, right? And he's going to tell us, there are 18 days each year that there's a mitzvah ligmor b'nei tahal. There's 18 days. I'm not going to ask you to tell me what are those 18 days. You could just come to shul every day and then you'll check the box. That's the simplest way to do it. But there's 18 different days that we say Hallel. And you can keep going through this. For example, halacha zayin mekomot shos yom tov sheni yamim gon metal asrim b'achad yom. So he says, the Rambam understands that some of us are privileged to have a second day of Yom Tov. We don't just do one day of Pesach, we do two. We're so lucky. And we get to do 2 days of Sukkot and an extra day of Sukkot, an extra day of Shavuos. So he says, well, that means there's an extra 3 days of Hallel a person has to say, right? So 18 plus 3 is really 21. So he tells us, and he's listing out all the different days that we're going to have to say Hallel. And then in the last halacha, halacha chet, he goes and even talks about like how do we go and make the difference between a full Hallel and a half Hallel, right? A half a Hallel isn't like a half a sandwich and like, get a half a sandwich and a soup. It's not that. A half a Hallel is meaning like we know that we take out 2 of the paragraphs of Hallel, and that's what's called like a half Hallel. And again, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So that's what the Rambam tells us. He tells us the whole big story, and all of a sudden he comes and tells us also the laws of Hallel. What is anyone bothered by any part of that? What is the mitzvah? What is the mitzvah and the halachos of Hallel doing here? If you were writing the Rambam, where might you think would be a more appropriate place that you might think to put Hilchot Hallel? What was that? I can't hear what? Pesach. Okay, so my Hilchos Pesach. Okay, that's like Pesach being like one of the biggest miraculous holidays. So if you had to choose a holiday, that would be a good holiday. Good. Hilchos Yom Tov, right? If he was just giving the broad halachos of Yom Tov, that would be where you would think it. Where's another place where the Rambam might have maybe put Hallel? Halacha Rosh Chodesh. Or what about just Hilchot Tefillah? Like he goes through the halachos of Tefillah, so why can't it go there? Why does the Rambam feel it necessary, almost in a sense like randomly? It's like he said the word Hallel, and he's like, oh yeah, by the way, Hallel. Let me run you through a bunch of halachos on Hallel. And he actually continues. I didn't give it all to you. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, why does the Rambam choose to embed the laws of Hallel specifically in Chanukah and not somewhere else? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Going back to halacha 5,
Mm-hmm.
where it says it's about Hallel, it's just looking at it about the Megillah. But we don't say Hallel in Hallel.
Correct. Well, the Megillah serves as a Hallel, basically. When we read the Megillah, it's like Hallel, but that's like, we should come back to that Purim time. But that is correct. Yeah, correct. We don't say it. Which is, again, an interesting thing to think about. Hold that thought in the back of your head, and I think it'll add color to our discussion.
Wasn't there one time a Megillah for Hanukkah?
Yes, there's also like Sefer Maccabim as well, like Maccabees as well. And there's a lot to unpack about the story as well. Also a really great point. I want to park it here for a minute, and maybe if there's time at the end, we'll come back to like the Megillah and how this all kind of like ties together if we have time at the end. It's a good point. So I want to take that question and have that being like our overarching question that we're going to come back to at the end. Let's now like delve a little bit deeper. If I had to ask you, what is like the key mitzvah of Chanukah? If you had to like tell me like there was one thing that like Chanukah is all about, it would be what? Good. It would be the Chanukah candles, right? That would be like that would be the biggest thing. We light candles. Everyone does all the big Chanukah candle lightings. You know, there's always like some big menorah in some big Times Square or wherever it might be. There's people feel like their apartments, like you can take pictures. It's like a big thing. We light candles, right? And if we ask people, they would tell us that is by far the most significant part of the Chanukah holiday. What's actually interesting though is if we look at the Gemara in Shabbos, which is box number 2, the Gemara in Shabbos, which is it's basically the primary source that we have in the Talmud itself about Chanukah. Tell me what the Gemara tells us about what our Chanukah celebration is really meant to be about. My Chanukah. So the Tan Rabbanan bekafe bekise yome de Chanukah timna inun delo lemispe bonu delo lidano pon. So when it comes to Chanukah, why do we light the lights of Chanukah? Or what is Chanukah, I should say? That's really a better translation. What is Chanukah? So Chazal teach us that on the 25th of Kislev, there are 8 days of Chanukah. We don't make eulogies and we don't fast. Why don't we? Why? The Yavanim come and they made everything impure inside the Beis Hamikdash. When the Chashmonaim came and overcame them and won, as we know, they only found one pach echad, and they knew it was good because they had the seal of the Kohen Gadol on it. And we know it only lasted 1 day. So now said Bones, there was a big miracle. And then next year, what did they do? What did they do the very next year to celebrate? How did they celebrate Hanukkah that very next year? Does the Gemara talk anything about lighting candles? There's no mention of candles. We talk about candles being the most important part, and yet the Gemara makes no reference whatsoever to lighting candles. In fact, there's a fascinating machloket. What's the bracha that we make when we light the candles? Lalik ner shel Chanukah. There's actually a fascinating machloket as to whether it's lalik ner Chanukah or whether it's lalik ner shel Chanukah. You'd have to look in like the different siddurim. I didn't look. I think it's all. I've always grew up that it was lahalik ner shel Chanukah because it fits better with the melody. I think that's why it was chosen, like lahalik ner shel Chanukah. If you don't have that, it doesn't fit as well. But there's a lot of actually interesting pieces. What is it? Why do we say ner shel Chanukah? So when it comes to Shabbat, for example, so the Shtei Chamed actually makes a point. He says that we actually should not say the word shel. He says it should be ner Chanukah. Why? Because ner Chanukah is actually different than like nerot shel Shabbat. When you light candles on Friday night, what's the bracha we make? We say lalik ner shel Shabbat, right? And so those lights that we light on Shabbos are actually very different. They are the lights shel of Shabbos. These lights are meant to add shalom bayis to a person's home. These lights are meant to illuminate and create oneg Shabbos. We're meant to enjoy those lights. But the Hanukkah lights themselves, we're not allowed to use those lights. They're like symbolic. They are the lights of what? Of Hanukkah. They're nerot Hanukkah. They're not nerot shel Hanukkah. They're not lights, the Shtei Chamed says, that we light for Hanukkah as much as, so they're not lights that we use so we can light up our lights to enjoy the holiday of Hanukkah. They are like the Ikar mitzvah itself. And yet what's amazing is when we go through the sources, like the Gemara and Shabbos, there's no mention whatsoever of lighting candles. In fact, if you flip over and you look in source 5 and source 6, Ma'oz Sur, which by the way, lest you think like Ma'oz Sur was like some like pretty recent melody or song, it's more than 700 something years old. Look at how it's described. Yavanim nikbutzu alai, azai b'mei chashmanim, ufartzu chamo midai v'timu kol hashmanim, umid nautar kankanim nasa neis l'shoshanim b'nei bina b'mei shona kavu shir uranani. What did they do? Kavu what? Shir urananim. They established what? Of course, I cut it off like an idiot. I'm sorry. So you have to, I cut out the last line. I don't know why I did that. But they established it as a time of singing and joy, right? Which is, what would you have expected Maoist to say? V'kavu shmona chimei hadlakos neros. So for 700 years, we have Maoist. Look at Al Hanisim. This is like the other addition we have to our davening is Al Hanisim. So we'll say, "Va'acha ken ba'u v'nachal liver beitacha ofinu techalecha v'tiaru et mitashacha v'yidliku nerot b'chatzot kodshacha." They lit the candles in the Beis Hamikdash. V'kavu shmona chimei Chanukah elu. What was the time established for? Lehodot, lehalel, l'shimcha hagadol. It was a time of what? Giving thanks, praising God's great name, but nothing about lighting candles whatsoever. It doesn't exist. And in fact, some Achronim suggest that that lighting the Chanukah candles is actually not part of the celebration originally at all. In fact, some suggest that the lighting of the Chanukah candles that we do today serves a very different purpose. If you look, for example, if you flip back to box number 3 in Bamidbar, which we'll get to eventually in our Torah reading cycle, the Torah tells us, right, so go speak to Aaron, and these are the instructions on how to light the Neros, how to light the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. Aaron does just as God commands. And then again, and this is again how the menorah was established. We'll read this not just later in Parshat Balotcha, we'll read this also like on the 8th day of Chanukah as well. Like that long lighting also will encompass a piece of this as well. The Ramban though says something amazing. If you look in box 4, so there's this very well-known idea that Aharon, the Medrash tells us that Aaron was like a little bit insulted. He was a little bit hurt that he wasn't able to bring like a gift, like the Nisim. Everyone got to participate. Everybody got to give a gift, and poor old Aaron didn't get to give a gift. So God understood how upset he was. God said, "Okay, I'm going to make it right for you. I'm going to make it good for you. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the mitzvah of menorah." And what's going to be the significance of the mitzvah of menorah? It's going to last for generations. So take a look at this. So Rambam says, in the middle of the first line, Moshe, Al ticharei. Don't be so worried. The Dolam is Odatamukhan. You're going to get an even greater honor than anything else. Korbanot, Kol Zman, Shebeit HaMikdash Kayam Hayinu Nagim. So long as the Beis HaMikdash was established, we were able to light the Korbanot were given. Abba Hanerot, but lighting the candles, Le'olam El Mul Pnei HaMenorah Ya'irut. They will forever be lit. But time out. When the Beis Hamikdash stopped existing, did the menorah keep getting lit? There was no menorah. So how is this any better than the korbanos that the Nisim got to light? So what does it continue? And all the brachos that I give you to bless my children also continue forever, like the lighting of the menorah. When there is no Beis Hamikdash, and the sacrifices have been removed, they're no longer there, they're batel, because the Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed. Also the lighting of the candles also doesn't happen. Why do we light the Chanukah candles today? We light the candles today to remind us of the Beis Hamikdash. This is the continuation, the promise that was made to Aaron that one day, even when the Beis Hamikdash is long gone, in our gullus, in our exile, we will continue to light the candles, and we're going to continue to light those candles to remember back to this moment of Aaron as well. And so when we light the candles today, we're not lighting the candles per se. I mean, we are tying it to the holiday of Chanukah, and we are remembering this, but for 200 something years, I'm going to say it differently, that very first Chanukah that was celebrated, there was no lighting of any menorah. In fact, it probably would have been forbidden to light a menorah. There was a Beis Hamikdash. We lit in the Beis Hamikdash. And so there was no taking your menorah back home, and I say menorah, I also mean like Chanukah or whatever. It just didn't happen. And so while we think about the lights as being the primary focus and the Chanukah candles as being the primary focus of the holiday of Chanukah, the truth is that for 200 years, it wasn't a part of it at all. And we actually see this idea in a few other places as well. The Ravid in box number 7. This is the Rambam in Hilchos Brachos. And so besides, there's another question that we can ask about the bracha that we make on the Chanukah candles. What should the bracha really look like? If you were constructing the bracha of lighting Chanukah candles, how should it sound? What's the bracha for taking a lulav and etrog?
The tilas.
Right, al netilat lulav. Hashem commands us to do something. Al netilat lulav. So what should we, if we were to write it for Chanukah candles, should be what? Al hadlakas neros, or al whatever, right? On the lighting of the candles. But instead, we have a different bracha. We say lehadlik ner shelchan. We don't say al. And so the Ravid points up on this. He realizes this. He says, if you want to say kol mitzvah shibin divrei many rabbinic mitzvah. Omer al, we say the word al like al netilat lulav, right? Shehi ke'ein rishus, because it's like it's a different level. It's a rabbinic decree. So he says kashali ner Chanukah. Says what about ner Chanukah? Ner Chanukah is a rabbinic mitzvah. It doesn't come from the Torah. The Torah doesn't say thou shalt thou shalt light Chanukah candles. So he offers two possibilities. He says ulai mipnei she'ein la kitzva shemahadrin mosifin. So he says maybe Chanukah candles are different because the shi'ur, the required amount of lighting the Chanukah candles, actually can vary by person. There's like you can get a fancier esrog or a fancier lulav or whatever, right? You can invest in a nicer set, but everybody has one lulav, and everyone has one esrog. When it comes to Chanukah candles, we take for granted that everybody's going to light every single night an increasing amount of Chanukah candles. But the Gemara, in discussing this, the famous machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, whether or not we add every night or whether we take away, or what is the mitzvah and what is mahadrin, min ha-mahadrin, whether it's just one, ner ishuveto. So because of all this, because it's not exactly clear how many we should light, so maybe it gets a different bracha. That's one possibility. But listen to the second possibility. Inami, mipnei shezo habracha hukva'a al haneros shebemikdash shehein shel Torah. What's the second? Because it's on the the bracha is a bracha that was hukva'a al haneros shebemikdash. This is a reference to the Beis Hamikdash itself. When we light our candles, it is meant to be like we're lighting candles in the Beis Hamikdash. And that is like a Torah level obligation, which is different than rabbinic, and maybe that's why we have a different bracha for it as well. And again, there's a bunch of other different areas where we can see this playing itself out. For example, there's a well-known machloket about hanacha osa mitzvah or hadlaka osa mitzvah. Is it the lighting itself, like in other words, the physical lighting? Or is it where it's placed? Remember, it has to be placed in a place to create pursum and isa. So, for instance, if you light the candles, I don't know, in your bathroom, for example, nobody's going to see those candles except for the people in the bathroom, right? So, does hanacha, where I place it, matter more than hadlaka? So there's this machlok. And Rashi here, if you look in box number 8, Rashi here tells us that we see that hadlaka matters. Why? Because iha mitzvah shochanaka tluya ba'hadlaka madlikin kida eshkechan b'menova. We see that it's about hadlaka, and he ties it back. Rashi makes this connection once again, to the Beis Hamikdash. And so I don't mean to burst any bubbles here, but what I would try to kind of emphasize to everybody is that we make this big to-do about lighting the candles, and that is true. That is like an important element. But if we really think about the real experience of Chanukah, it actually is not about lighting the candles as much as it is about for something else. For 220 years, what was the celebration of Chanukah if it wasn't lighting candles? It was saying Hallel. Hallel was the main way that we celebrated for those 200 years. And I believe, and this is the argument I want to make this evening, Hallel is really what Chanukah is all about. And perhaps this helps us answer our initial question as to why did the Rambam choose of all places to put the halachos of Hallel, why did he choose to put it here in the story of Chanukah? Because for Chanukah, Hallel is the mitzvah. It's the perfect place. Yes, we could think about maybe putting it in bigger mitzvah, in bigger miracles or other holidays or in Hilchos Tefillah or something like that. But the truth is that the mitzvah itself of Chanukah is the recitation of Hallel. And so with that, I want to pivot for a moment, and we'll come back to this for a second, which is, well, then what is the nature and purpose of Hallel itself? Like why, what is Hallel all about? And so we alluded to the fact before that there are these two types of Hallel. There's like a whole Hallel and a half a Hallel, okay? Why on Pesach, for instance, do we say half Hallel? Yeah, after the first day or two, meaning after the first days of Pesach, for the rest of Hallel, the rest of Pesach, we say a half a Hallel. Why do we say half a Hallel? Whereas, for example, like on Sukkot, we say a Hallel, a full Hallel the whole time.
Same korban.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So one possibility, if you look in the Gemara in Erechim, which is box number 10. So my Shna B'Chag, so this is what the Gemara wants to know, box 10. Why is Sukkot different? That we say Hallel every day full, but whereas Pesach, my Shna B'Pesach the Lamina, where we don't say a full Hallel. So Kol Yoma Dechag Chalukin B'Korban de Pesach and Chalukin B'Korban. What's the fundamental difference between the two? Exactly like Morris said, when it comes to Pesach, so there isn't a unique korban every single day, it's the same korban. When it comes to Sukkot, every single day, there's a different korban, and because of the different korban, therefore we have Hallel. But there's actually a second reason. I don't know, what's the second reason why we say a half a Hallel? Every time I say half a Hallel, I still think about like a half a sandwich. Anyone else say that? I don't know. Can't get out of my head. I don't know why. When we say a half a Hallel on the rest of the days of Pesach, what's the reason? So look at box number 9. The Gemara Megillah says something very different. Amar Yochanan, my dichtiv v'lo karav ze'el ze'kol halayla, that they didn't come one next to the two encampments, the Jewish people and the Mitzrim, when they were encamped about at Yam Suf. They didn't like attack each other all night long. So Bakshu Malachi Ashari Lomar Shira. In this moment, the Malachi Asharis, the angels, they wanted to say Shira. They wanted to say Hallel. And how do we know from the text that they wanted to say Hallel? Look at the text. V'lo kara ze'el zeh. Ze'el zeh is like part of Kedusha, right? Like they wanted to sing. This is like a moment. So the Gemara and Chazal are picking up on this phraseology in the Torah to say that it must have been that somebody wanted to praise Hashem in this moment. Must have been the Malach Ashari. So what does Hashem say? My creations are going to be dying and you're going to be celebrating. And so there's a second reason why we don't say it. It's because the Egyptians were drowning. And so it emerges are two different reasons why on Pesach we don't say a full Hallel for all the days. Either because there's not a unique a korban every day, or because we are showing empathy towards towards God's creations and our enemies who are being destroyed in these moments. Two different reasons. So what's like the obvious question that we always ask every time we have two answers? Why do we need to have two answers? Like one answer is good enough. The answer from the Gemara Erechim about the difference between Sukkot and Pesach and the Korban, that sounds like perfect. Like that should solve all of our problems. Let's leave it at that. And so Rav Aaron Cutler asks this question, and he says that we actually have to go back to the very nature, to the very like essence of what Hallel is all about, because there's two different types of things that can trigger a Hallel. One thing that can trigger a Hallel is like the simcha of a chag, the simcha of a joyous holiday, and that is expressed through what? Bringing a korban. The second way that we would say Hallel is what? When it comes to seeing something miraculous. If you see a nace, we say Hallel, we say offer shira to Hashem. And this is what each of these two different reasons are there for. The Gemara teaches us that there is a reduction in the joy of the nace. That's one possibility. And the Gemara in Erechim, which talks about the korban, tells us that there's a reduction in the practice in the korban, which is not unique to every single day. And by Pesach, so we need both these answers to teach us why there's half a Hallel. So what does this have anything to do with Chanukah? Like it's interesting, fine. So on Chanukah, what do we have? We don't have any korbanos. All we have is what? A nes. All we have is a miracle. And by the way, what's the obvious question that you might ask based on this? The nes, we have one miracle. So then what? So you might say, well, 1 second, so we should say a half a hallel. We should say hallel. But let's say a half a hallel for all those other days because there was only one miracle, and it's like korbanos. In other words, the same way, like there are different korbanos every single day. Or, for example, that there was God's creations were being destroyed. So Tosfos asks this question. If you flip over here to the back page, and Tosfos says something remarkable about Chanukah. And points out, he says, "V'yom tov rishon shel Pesach, hu gomer halal aval shmoneh yemei Pesach lo mishum b'lo dami leChanukah v'Sukkot." It's different. Why? The Chanukah dinahu ligmar halal dekol achat yamim haya hanes nitzgadel v'haya kol chad v'chad yom tov. Every single day, it's like, okay, day one it was a miracle. You're like, all right, I don't know, something miraculous happened. But like every day that light continued to go, it was like the miracle got bigger. It wasn't just that it was the same miracle that continued for 7 days. The fact that the very next day it continued was a miracle unto itself, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And so, in other words, that this Hallel itself, the Hallel of Chanukah, is the only thing that we have. We have nothing else. This is like our religious experience. And so, when we think about Hallel, so what does that mean to have Hallel be the tool by which we can experience the holiday? So take a look at the Gemara in Pesachim in box number 12. There is two different, as we know, when it comes to many prakim of Tehillim, there can be different types of introductions, right? So like there's Nitzach or Nigun, right, or Maskil David, but there's two in particular that seem to be almost like the same, but yet different. There's like the David Mizmor, and there's Mizmor LeDavid. And so what is the difference between LeDavid Mizmor and Mizmor David? Like those are the same words. David sang, and sang David. Those mean the same thing. So the Gemara explains what's the difference. So if you look towards the bottom, Melamed She'amar Shira, LeDavid Mizmor, Melamed She'sharta Alav Shchina V'achar Kach Amar Shira. When it comes to LeDavid Mizmor, so this tells us that God's divine presence rested on King David, and then he said Shira. Mizmor LeDavid, however, is Melamed She'amar Shira. It teaches us that he said that King David said Shira. V'achar kach sharta alav shchina. After he praised God, only God then does God come and rest upon him. And Aaron Color says that what we see here is two distinctive modes for saying Chanukah. When Hallel is based on a chav, when it's based on the korban itself, then it's being sung for something that is external. That we are told that today, like Sukkot, God tells us, you need to observe Sukkot. God tells us in the Torah, you need to observe Pesach. And Shavuos, God tells us. It comes from an external source. However, there are some moments when Hallel is based on a nes, when we see something miraculous. So God doesn't tell us in that moment to sing Hallel. Quite the opposite. It's a spontaneous song of gratitude. And that is what Chanukah is all about. And so in a sense, Hallel, it's not just a reaction to the holiday, Ron Cutler says. It's the way in which we process the actual holiday itself. When we see something that we can't believe, we're like, oh my God, did you see that? Like you turn to your friend, what was that? We have to process it. How do you process a miracle like the Chanukah miracle? And the answer is Hallel. Every time we say Hallel for a nes, it is meant to help us serve to process. And how do I know that to be true? If you actually look through the paragraphs of Hallel, they really have a number of really important themes. For example, there is a famous machlokas, we won't look at it inside, in Pesachim, which comes a little later in box 13, for example, as to on Pesach, when we were finishing the Hallel, what should we say? And the Gemara says we have two options. Some said we should say, one is to say Psalm 23, Hashem Roi Lo Achsar, and everyone else says we should say Hallel. Now, when I think of like Psalm 23, the only thing I think about is like funerals, right? Like that's all I think about. I mean, yes, we sing at Shalosh Shittus, but like I don't know, when I think of like, Tehillim Kaf Gimel, I just think about like, we sing it in the most somber moments. So what is the most somber Tehillim have anything to do with something so joyous like Hallel? What is the Hava mean of the Gemara to suggest that we didn't know which we should choose? Some do this and some do that when it comes to Pesach. And the answer is, at its core, what is the notion of like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? I walk through lush pastures. I don't even know it all by heart in English. But the answer is that it's a mizmor. It is a parak of Tehillim all about emunah and faith. And when we think about Hallel, it's not just a mechanism of offering thanks to God. Thanks, God, appreciate it. You took care of us. You're the best. It is the mode and mechanism by which we process the miracle and we show our emunah and we show our faith to Hashem. And if we look, for example, in the Tehillim itself, in the Tehillim which are selected, we look, for example, in box 15. This is just like the first paragraph of Hallel, and you could read through it, right? This is pretty well known to us. Right? So servants of the Lord give praise the name of the Lord. Let the name of the Lord be blessed now forevermore. And so like this just sounds like lots of good blessing stuff, but there's actually a number of interesting commentaries. For example, the Barbanel here points out something interesting. He says that the entire Tehillim here that we say as part of Hallel is actually a dialogue. So for instance, we say Yehi Shem Hashem Mevorach, right? Because we rise to the setting of the sun. So God is praised. And so what do the nations of the world say? Rama Kol Goyim. They say, no, God, the sun sets, but God, he just lives in the heavens. So what do we respond with? So we respond with Mika Hashem Elkeinu HaMagbil HaShabbat Hashem Mashpili L'Rot B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz. God, they say Rama Kol Goyim that God just stays up in the heavens. We say no, but he cares about the heavens and the earth. And so the Barbanel, you can read it on your own. It's really beautiful. He suggests that there's this like dialogue which is showing us just the proof that God cares deeply about this world, and that we should have faith in God in the same way that he has faith in mankind. Or for example, the Medrash in Tehillim, box 17, describes how why do we start Hallel with Halu Abdei Hashem, that we were the Avadim of Hashem, specifically that we are like servants, slaves to Hashem. It's meant to bring us back to a previous time when we were slaves to Paro, which was the biggest moment of faith, right? That we should have faith that God would take us out, remember a promise in a way that is so miraculous. We're trying to remember these things. And so the goal of Hallel, at least in this first chapter, is that it's really it's a reaction to miracles. And this is where we declare our emunah and our faith in Hashem. And in fact, the Marsha tells us in Psachim, in box 14, that Elu hachamisha hem kolim haikarim hashlosha, that Avitzia Mitzrayim Craig Amsof, Marima Mitzyato v'chidush olam, umatantor dechtiv harim rakdu, etc. And tchiat hametim. So, like, if you look through all of the chapters that we select for Hallel, you will notice the Marsha says that all of the main themes, all of the ikarim that a person should believe in, from God's existence, creation of the world, the Torah and Shemaim, Tchias Hametim, all these things actually have their roots and can be found in Hallel itself. And so what emerges from all of this, if we take it back to Chanukah itself, is that Hallel is not just something that we are meant to do as part of davening on Chanukah. Quite the opposite. In fact, there is a fascinating debate about whether or not women are obligated in saying Hallel on Chanukah. It's a big machloket. The Rambam describes mitzvot shasei grama, that time-bound mitzvos. The Rambam describes lighting Chanukah candles as one of them, but that makes no mention whatsoever about saying Hallel. I would argue, and again, this is another share from another time, that if the main purpose of the holiday isn't the lighting the candles, and I'm not trying to say that, I don't want anyone to walk away and say, Rabbi said don't have to light candles this year. No, you should go buy your candles, light them, and we should do Pirsum Anisa. That's a big part of the holiday too. I'm not saying don't do it. And we should also be reminded of the Beis HaMikdash and of Aaron HaKohen when we light those candles as well. but we shouldn't discount the Hallel. If you're not going to be at shul, make sure you say Hallel, because the Hallel is really the essence. This is why the Rambam makes sure to include Hallel exactly where he does. And it's not just essential to Chanukah, but also that it is a reaction to a nace. It is a reaction to a miracle, and it is the means by which we are able to process this. And so this is really what I think Chanukah is about. And I think this really is the best way for us to experience the miracle of Chanukah. And there's no better way to do that when everyone comes together in person to sing a very joyous Hallel. And so this is my invitation to join us for services during the week, for davening during the week, or on Shabbat or on Sunday, whatever it might be, and to really lean into the Hallel for Chanukah to experience the true miracle and the true joy of Chanukah. So stop here, and wishing everybody a Chanukah Sameach, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody really soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Shkach. Beautiful.